All right, this week. No, that's not the right one. Hang on. That was my, so I'll post, so I record the office hours, so, and I'll post them to YouTube. So I'll provide the YouTube link. I don't know where, sorry. Where can I get? One second. Let's try this one more time. Okay, module 1. So by tomorrow, we have a badge assignment due. So let's review. Can everybody see the getting started module? Hopefully, yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, if you can't see what I'm talking about, please tell me, because sometimes it lets me navigate, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so the badge assignment and the syllabus acknowledgement is due by tomorrow night. So please do that, because if you don't, you will be dropped from the course. So please don't forget to do that. Okay, so module 1, let's talk about executive function. You'll hear us talk about this a lot. So really, when we look at executive function disorders, a lot of times the #1 disorder that I deal with on a regular basis that comes to mind is attention deficit. So ADHD seems to be the one that always comes to mind, but there's lots of different disorders that have executive function as a component in the disorder. And when we look at just strictly executive function, let's review what those are. Okay, can everybody see the presentation? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, does someone give me a yes? So when we're looking at, oh wait, hold on, that's not the right one. That's the treatment one. So I just want to kind of review what an executive function disorder is. #1 thing I think about right now comes to mind, like I said, attention deficit. And the next one, oh, I'm so sorry. I am a little out of practice with doing this on Zoom. I'm usually in a different, I've been doing virtual therapy, so I'm in a different mindset than Zoom. So I apologize. Okay, a little rusty. Here we go. Let's try that one more time. I always click the wrong next. So when I say executive function, I'm usually thinking of cognitive, and really it's kind of that brain regulation. Can you regulate yourself? So it's how we use what we know, and we regulate and change our behaviors according to what's going on. So kind of thinking a lot of frontal lobe. So you can kind of look at some of these definitions. So really some of the components that lie with executive function is planning and organization, initiation, and then persistence. So sticking with something that you started, being flexible, and then actually doing the things you say you're going to do, and then self-regulation. Can you keep yourself on a time frame? Can you transition from one activity to the next? Can you leave something and then return to it? So kind of you look at those 6 components, and when we say selecting goals, we're really like, what's your goal today? Like, here's my to-do list. Can I do A, B, and C? So really, what is your goal or your intent of what you're going to do for either your day, the next 10 minutes, the next year? So really looking at kind of that broad goal of broad range goals. They could be very small goals, and they could be long-term goals. Other things that affect your determination, anticipation of outcomes and consequences. I do this and I get this. So definitely looking at what's required to accomplish things. So, and how do I have to adjust myself to meet that goal? And when we look at a disorder, say like attention deficit, there's a lot of things that can impact their ability to be successful if they have deficits in all of those areas of executive function. Another big prominent one that we work with is traumatic brain injury. Aphasia is another one. So if you look at TBI, traumatic brain injury, aphasia, another thing that comes with executive function, as well as you look at the disorder like autism, can have a lot of executive function challenges. So other factors. So look at reactions to change in the unexpected, and then dependent on higher order thinking and ability to reason. So definitely some of those things. If I don't know if you ever met somebody who's maybe inflexible. I have a few of those in my life right now. It's like, hey, especially as a therapist, I will tell you guys, as a therapist, you absolutely have to be flexible. If you're type A, this is what I'm going to do, A, B, and C. That can be maybe a challenge for some of you. So looking at goal attainment, you can kind of look at this. Now, what also happens a lot of times with people with executive function disorders, they do rely on like outside support, either a person, lists, other things to help keep them in line. So other factors that affect self-regulation. So ability of the individual to efficiently observe, judge, monitor, realize completion, and then react accordingly. So looking at what they're doing with someone else judged the same way. So for instance, maybe you all have an example of this. You ask maybe your child, your roommate, significant other, hey, clean your room. Your version of clean and their version might be totally two different things. So like my children, I work with them on everything off the floor, everything off the counter, and nothing just shoved in the closet. So, to them, sometimes everything's just shoving in the closet. Well, it's not my definition of clean, but it's their definition. So really looking at kind of through the lens, okay, I complete this task. Will my boss think it's done? Will they also think, yes, this was done the way it's expected? So some of those observing and judging can definitely be a challenge, and having alignment with what the expectation is. So a lot of times these people need to know what the expectation is so they can kind of regulate themselves to get there. So when we're looking at executive function, it's kind of our last skill. So it's really, so much of it is controlled in the prefrontal cortex. So there we go with it, anatomy and physiology. And that frontal lobe really fully doesn't develop till well into adulthood. So the prefrontal cortex has, they make moral, ethical decisions, control impulsivity, kind of regulate your behavior based on social expectations, adaptation, and then modify and adapt behaviors based on norms and expectations. So sometimes this behavior is okay in a certain situation, and this behavior is not okay in another situation. So kind of understanding those differences and modifying yourself can be a challenge for some people. So yeah, it's not incomplete. The development of the frontal lobe really isn't complete until mid-20s. So when you think of that, that's, mid-20s. Mid-20s can mean different things to different, they might be okay by 23, but they really might not be okay until closer to 26. In our prefrontal cortex, we kind of start to lose function as we age. So it also declines as we age. So some causes of executive function, I was looking at neurological there. Traumatic brain injury, neurological damage to the frontal lobe. So let's say you had some kind of car accident, something like that, bike accident, and you did damage to your frontal lobe. Definitely you can start to have executive function disorders. Other developmental disorders. So, and I say that as like the umbrella of developmental disorders, something like autism, other developmental disorders like, say, Down syndrome, something that would be characterized as developmental disorder, which is wide. Definitely, we see a lot of executive function deficits with the developmental disorders, as well as other medical conditions. So people who have, let's say, even something as, I want to say chemical imbalance, but other mental health issues, other things, bipolar, definitely can have some challenges with executive function. So a variety of things can cause issues with executive function. It's usually not solely by itself, it's usually in conjunction with other things. So the good part about language is language allows for executive function development, and also it also kind of plays that role in like self-talk, remind, reflect, understanding, hey, this behavior wasn't okay because of this. So understanding some of that cause and effect and have the language to synthesize that is super important. And then a lot of things too, when we look at, if we don't have those language skills, definitely that can be a component into not understanding or expressing how they feel or why they feel some way or why they have that response to something that maybe others don't understand. So they can't a lot of times explain where they are in their executive functioning capacity. So those are just some things to think about. And then when we're looking at kind of treatment, okay, so what do we do to help that? The biggest thing I want to say is there's a lot of different strategies. So basically, in a nutshell, we don't cure it or make it better. Our speech is just a component of supporting somebody and helping them develop some compensatory strategies. We won't take it away per se. And I mean those in terms. So a lot of times, you know, somebody will come to you, you're going to be treating them, they have executive function disorder, and they're ready for you to, you know, make it better, make it go away. Well, really what we do is we might directly teach a skill. We might help them modify the expectation, modify the environment, help them build the skill of self-awareness and self-regulation so their executive function can improve. Help them develop the language so they can convey the things that they need or want or are struggling with. And then we teach a lot of compensatory strategies. Okay, this is a challenge for me. How do I work on this? So we definitely kind of work on a lot of concepts when we're working with somebody with an executive function disorder. So the biggest thing I want to say, and this is true, and I hold really, really firm on this in general. Anytime we do therapy for speech sound disorder, fluency, autism, language, whatever we're doing, really anything we can reduce clutter, super helpful. Reduce visual distractions, noise. So other thing too is use organizer or have something set up in a very organized fashion. So it becomes, I don't want to say routine or rote, but logical. Hey, this is step 1, step 2, step 3. Yeah, label, color code, file, put things, you know, away in an orderly fashion. And then a lot of cues. What are the to-dos? Leave, you know, as visual reminders, verb, you know, lots of phrases like, for instance, I remember doing this with a person, an adult who had a pretty significant brain injury and was trying to be able to live on their own again, and just making reminders, turn on alarm, turn off alarm, turn, you know, lock the car, whatever it was, close the garage door, check stove, all these things that they needed to do a check to make sure they could stay safe. So we used a lot of like little phrases, a lot of visual reminders for them. And that can hold true for somebody who's an adult to even a young child. So a lot of what we do too is really making language relevant and meaningful. And we're obviously going to reinforce the skills that we're trying to teach them. and that metacognition. So really, talking about thinking, thinking about talking, talking about talking, a lot of what we call those higher order metacognitive skills, we definitely work on those. And when I say that, I think a lot of our clients who have autism, who might have a traumatic brain injury, we're usually helping them develop some of that cognitive language skills to help convey their feelings, their frustrations, their challenges. So kind of look at what their language does for us. So you can look at that, and we'll revisit that several times. And then the other part too, some of the other focus, I think when we're dealing with executive function, we work a lot on semantics and reasoning. So what is it and why, this is important, this isn't important, why we need to order things in order of sequential, this is first, this is next, this is last. Self-talk also to kind of give them the verbiage to help them regulate themselves. Okay, for instance, with an adult, I might teach, okay, you need to do a self-check. Did I do this? Did I turn this off? Did I put this away? Did I, pack my laptop so I have it when I get to work? All of these things, we kind of teach some of those self-checklists. How do you do a mental check? How do you evaluate your behavior? Okay, is my response normal to everybody? What's everybody else doing? What am I doing? So some of these things we help them work on, and we kind of develop and practice when we're in therapy. So a lot of what we do too is work on self-awareness and self-regulation. So we're not the only therapy discipline to do this. I would say physical therapy and occupational therapy does it quite a bit. So each of us, is those three disciplines, we do it in a certain capacity, but really some of that self-awareness, self-regulation is, okay, what am I doing? What's my body doing? What's my face saying? What are the words coming out of my mouth? And also, okay, when we look at some of the broader things in their day, when we look at daily living tasks, okay, how am I going to accomplish getting my breakfast ready, my, dressed and ready for work, and, how am I going to pay my bills, those kinds of things. So it could be simple as to actually what you're doing, but also how do I stay living in the state that I'm living? So what happens sometimes, especially to somebody who's had an injury and they're later in life, so adult at some capacity over the age of 18, this could be a determining factor on whether or not they're safe to live on their own, whether they need to live with somebody. Can they be trusted to be home alone? So those are some components that had never been a problem before, and now they are. That definitely impacts somebody's daily lives. Now, when we're looking at executive function from the developmental disability standpoint, so much we know we have to explicitly teach, we have to rehearse, we have to review, we have to revisit, we have to modify, and that's kind of a continual process, especially if they've always had it versus someone who acquired it. So looking at kind of those two points of view, those can be challenging. So a lot of times too, we also teach disability education. So somebody had sent me a message about this. When we talk about educating somebody on disability, what we're really talking about is them understanding their disability, understanding what their challenges are, what are some of the things they are good, what's their strengths, and then what's their weaknesses, and how they can support themselves and also then speak up and self-advocate for what they need. So definitely when I look at the older adult the older adolescent population, adolescents that are turning to adult quickly, we really try to make sure they understand what their disability is, what are their challenges, and what we can do to support them, as well as what they should advocate for what they need when they're in certain situations. So those are just some things when we talk about disability education. It's more teaching them about their particular disability and how their disability affects them, because a lot of times when you look at somebody with traumatic brain injury, no two traumatic brain injuries are alike, or two people who have autism, no two people with autism are alike. They might have some similarities, but each one's different and unique to them. So those are some things, and then teaching them what's a realistic expectation. So sometimes their expectation is low or it's too high. So is what they want to accomplish doable for what their disorder is? And then working on attention. So here's what I want to say about that. And we say that more in the broad sense, but when we look at somebody who has ADHD, I don't want to say you can't teach somebody attention, because I don't want to say that you teach it or you don't. We'll talk about kind of that birth to 3 population, but teaching them, okay, attention is hard. I struggle to pay attention. What are some strategies I can do to increase my attention? Or, how do I cue myself to pay attention to things that I need to pay attention to? So a lot of what we do in that regard is more along the lines of that than really teaching improving attention. A lot of times we might increase, especially when we're looking at somebody with a traumatic brain injury, we're looking at how we can increase their stamina. Can they do something for 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Can they sustain a task? So we might work on increasing their ability to sustain attention to something. So attention is used in a lot of ways, but we definitely work on those compensatory strategies to help them access those skills. So those are just some things that, so when you look through this, kind of when I say attention, we look through it in the more broader sense, not just attention to task, but more along attention, sustainability, stamina to be involved in something for a longer amount of time. In fact, my co-therapist, I'll talk about her a lot. Her daughter has a brain injury right now. She just had a brain tumor removed, and we're going through all this executive function stuff and, working with her on timing. She was 17 who had a job and drive. Now she can't drive. She isn't able to she was an honor student. She can't even sustain being in a classroom for longer than an hour. So really working on some of those skills. We've been kind of problem solving some ways to support her. But this week, so go through all that, be familiar with executive function. We have an assessment and then just a read and review summary. So those are the only 2 other things that are due, and these are due on Sunday. And don't forget that the Getting Starting module, those 2 assignments, they're quick, they're easy. Those are due by tomorrow night. So if you haven't done them, you'll be dropped from the class. And then on Sunday, the executive function disorder assessment and read and review summary. So someone's going to ask, can I use a note card? No. That'll be the next question. What I want you guys to do, and then you're like, well, what do I study? Review those presentations, some of the big concepts, and really be sure you can kind of verbally give a definition of what executive function disorder is and what are some of the characteristics of it. So just look through those 2 presentations and you guys should be good. The read and review summary, it tells you, let me click on it. Sorry, we have so much dust in here. Ooh, so review at least 4 resources on the read and review page. So what did you learn? What do you know? Kind of give me some feedback about that. And in looking at those resources, that'll help prepare you for the quiz. Most of the time, the read and review activity will prepare you for what's on the quiz. So just some helpful hints. And that's really it for tonight. I appreciate you guys joining me, everybody. And, I look forward to this semester. I'm super, super excited. And like I was telling my last class, I can't believe it's spring 2021. That's crazy to me. So hopefully things start to get easier this year. So anyway, if you have any questions or any other concerns or issues, be sure to send me a message. I check them usually first thing in the morning and at night. So, please know I try to check those at least twice a day. So if you have anything pressing, be sure to send me a message in Canvas immediately. And it sends me a notification too if you did. So I do try to check those right away. And that's really it. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you for joining, and you guys can have a good night.
I think there's a question in the chat, but I have a question as well.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. It changes. Most of the time there's usually 3 or 4 multiple choice, and then usually one kind of what I call phrase, fill in the blank. It's not usually essay. It's usually a couple word response. So I usually let you know if there's a lot of quote unquote, there's no essay per se in a quiz. Those are usually more for midterm and final. Really what I'm looking for is, do you have the big concept for this week? And some of the key details about it is usually what most of the quizzes are. So most of them are true, false, fill in the blank, or multiple choice.
On that same line, my question was, with the second presentation that we just went over, there are a lot of slides with like multiple ideas and steps on them. Should we make sure that we memorize those, or it's more of a general idea kind of thing?
I would say what like key details of like the disorder. So we talk about executive function, and there are lots of components to that. Be sure you're familiar with all those components. Do I expect you to know every possible target we might work on in therapy for executive function disorder? No, that's not what I'm looking for. But when you go through treatment, what are the common themes? So common theme we usually do with somebody with executive function disorder is like, we work on planning, organizing, working on following sequential steps, initiating, sustaining. So we do a couple different generalities for somebody who has executive function disorder. And that's kind of what we talk about. Here are the average things we do with this disorder. Obviously, each person is individualized. And that's really what I'm looking for. As an SLPA, you're going to go in, you're going to get a new client. Your supervisor is going to say, hey, you know, you have a new client, lots of issues with executive function. And then hopefully you get their goals ahead of time. You should. I can't say that you always do. But okay, executive function disorder, what are some things I might need to think about? Or what's their age? Okay, what are we trying to help them do? Especially when you look at kind of the different things, when we look at somebody who has executive function as a developmental disorder versus someone who acquired it through a brain injury. Those are kind of 2 different treatment modalities that you would learn in the setting that you're working in. But for the most part, I'm not looking for exact things verbatim, usually. I usually tell you if I'm looking for something verbatim. I usually let you know. Please know, vocabulary is always a good thing to review. So there's usually always a vocabulary word or 2 in all the quizzes. If something's dramatically different or something very specific, I usually let you know, hey, be sure you know this verbatim. I usually give you a warning. Okay?
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. And that's really it, guys. I appreciate you guys joining me. Like I said, I feel like this week has gone by quick already. So don't forget tomorrow to turn in your badge and syllabus acknowledgement quiz. And that way, otherwise you'll be dropped, no exceptions. So do it early in case you have internet problems, any issues submitting something, we can get it cleared up right away, okay?